November 1948. The United States Air Force Directorate of Intelligence has a problem. For months, reports have been coming in from across Europe. Military pilots, ground personnel, civilians with documented credibility, all describing the same thing: objects in the sky that should not be there, objects moving in ways nothing in the American arsenal, nothing in the Soviet arsenal can explain. The Directorate convenes, they review the evidence, and then they write a memo and stamp it top secret. The memo says this: these objects have been reported by so many sources and from such a variety of places that we are convinced that they cannot be disregarded and must be explained on some basis which is perhaps slightly beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking. Beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking. That is a classified memo from the United States military, written in 1948, admitting in plain language that something is happening in the sky that their intelligence framework cannot account for. And then they stamp it secret and put it in a file. That file sits there for 78 years. For 78 years, the official public position of the United States government is that there is nothing to see, no credible evidence, no unexplained phenomena worth discussing seriously. The Air Force runs a program called Project Blue Book, specifically designed to investigate reported sightings and then publicly explain them away. Between 1952 and 1969, Project Blue Book officially investigated more than 12,000 sightings. Its final report concluded that most were explainable as aircraft, weather phenomena, or observer error. The cases it could not explain were labeled insufficient data for a scientific analysis and quietly filed. But Project Blue Book is only what the public is told about. Separately, the CIA convenes a scientific panel in 1953 to assess the situation. The panel's classified recommendation is not to investigate more rigorously. It is to reduce public interest in the topic. They recommend that civilian UFO groups be monitored. They recommend a debunking campaign. Their stated goal is to lower the volume of sightings being reported, not to understand what is causing them. The FBI opens a case file on unidentified flying objects in 1947 that runs for 21 years, all of it classified. The internal conclusion and the public position are two entirely different things. On one side of that wall, the US Air Force Directorate of Intelligence is writing memos about objects that cannot be disregarded. On the other side, anyone who says they saw something is dismissed as unreliable, eccentric, or seeking attention. The strategy is not secrecy about a specific discovery. It is the systematic management of public perception, sustained for nearly 8 decades. That was the arrangement. Until this week. On May 8, 2026, the United States Department of War released more than 160 declassified files at a dedicated government website. The program is called PURSUE. It stands for Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. UAP is the modern military designation for what the public has always called UFOs, and it refers to unidentified anomalous phenomena. The release spans from November 1948 to January of this year. It contains documents, videos, and images. The source agencies include the Department of Defense, the FBI, NASA, and the State Department. More than 400 separate incidents are described across the files. President Trump posted on Truth Social, saying that with these documents and videos now available, the people can decide for themselves what the hell is going on. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said in an official statement that these files, hidden behind classifications, have long fueled justified speculation, and it is time the American people see it for themselves. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard called it the first in an ongoing joint declassification and release effort, with additional tranches to follow every few weeks. The Department of War acknowledged the full scope of what is still to come, describing an unprecedented historic undertaking that requires coordination between dozens of agencies and the review of tens of millions of records, many existing only on paper and spanning many decades. What was released this week is more than 160 files covering more than 400 incidents. Tens of millions remain under review. This is the first chapter. So what is actually in it? In July 1969, the 3 crew members of Apollo 11 returned from the moon. They had just completed one of the most documented journeys in human history. Every calculation checked, every instrument logged, every communication recorded. Shortly after splashdown, they were debriefed. That debriefing was classified. The Apollo 11 technical crew debriefing was conducted on July 31st, 1969. It was released to the public on May 8th, 2026. 57 years. What the files reveal is that astronaut Buzz Aldrin reported 3 separate unexplained incidents during the mission to the moon and back. The first occurred on the outward journey, about 1 day from the moon. Aldrin says in the debriefing that the first unusual thing they saw was about 1 day out, or something pretty close to the moon. It had a sizable dimension, so they put the monocular on it. The crew considered whether what they were looking at could be the SIVB stage, the section of the Saturn V rocket that had separated from the spacecraft earlier in the mission. That would be the mundane explanation. They examined that possibility. The object remained unidentified. The debriefers logged no conclusion. The second incident happened while Aldrin was trying to sleep inside the capsule. He said he was trying to go to sleep with all the lights out. He observed what he thought were little flashes inside the cabin, spaced a couple of minutes apart. He was confident he witnessed them on the second night of the mission. No source for the flashes was identified. No debris impact. No instrument malfunction. No explanation appears in the debriefing record. The third incident occurs on the return trip to Earth. Aldrin reports observing what he describes as a fairly bright light source, which the debriefing tentatively ascribed to a possible laser. Possibly a laser. From where? Aimed by whom? For what purpose? The debriefing offers no conclusion. Consider what kind of witness Buzz Aldrin is. He flew 66 combat missions in Korea before NASA recruited him. His doctoral thesis at MIT was on orbital mechanics. He was selected for Apollo 11 because he was among the most technically capable astronauts the program had ever trained. When he describes something in a debriefing as an unidentified object with a sizable dimension, that is not a casual observation. That is a precision instrument making a precise report that has no satisfying answer. His account of 3 separate unexplained encounters during the first moon landing mission sat in a government file until this week. Apollo 12 followed in November 1969. The second moon landing. Astronaut Alan Bean reports seeing flashes of light during the mission that he describes as sailing off into space. A photograph from the Apollo 12 landing site, released this week, shows the shadows of astronauts on the lunar surface. In the highlighted area slightly above the horizon, there is something else. The Defense Department captions the photograph with 2 words: unidentified phenomena. No further classification. No proposed explanation. Then there is Apollo 17, December 1972, the last time human beings walked on the moon. The crew is Commander Eugene Cernan, pilot Ronald Evans, and scientist Harrison Schmitt. They are on the return journey to Earth. According to the transcript released this week, during the return, the crew begins observing bright particles outside the spacecraft. Evans reports what appear to be very bright particles or fragments drifting past as they maneuver the capsule. Schmitt describes what he sees. There is a whole bunch of big ones on my window down there, just bright. It looks like the 4th of July out of Ron's window. Commander Cernan has a harder time explaining what he is observing. He has difficulty sleeping. The cause, as he describes it, is something like an imposing train headlight. Over the next 3 hours, Cernan describes observing several flashing, rotating phenomena that he assesses, in his own words, as corresponding to physical objects in space, rather than a purely optical phenomenon, not an optical illusion. Physical objects. In space. A trained astronaut and mission commander who has spent his career calculating exactly what is and is not in space, explicitly stating that what he is seeing corresponds to physical objects. One of the photographs released this week captures something from the Apollo 17 mission. 3 dots in a triangular formation appear in the lower right quadrant of the lunar sky. The Pentagon has included a note with the image. There is no consensus about the nature of the anomaly. A new preliminary analysis indicates that it could be a physical object. The last men to walk on the moon reported seeing things they could not identify. Those accounts were classified for 54 years. In the summer of 1947, the FBI opened a case file. File number 62 HQ 83894. It ran for 21 years, closing in July 1968. That is 2 decades of active FBI investigation into unidentified flying objects. During those 21 years, the official public position of the United States government was that these reports were not credible, not serious, and not worth investigating. According to the materials released this week, the case file contains investigative records, eyewitness testimonies, and public reports concerning unidentified flying objects and flying discs. It contains photographic evidence from sites including Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oak Ridge is the location where the Manhattan Project carried out its uranium enrichment operations. Photographic evidence gathered at a site of that significance was kept in a classified FBI file for decades. The file also contains technical proposals regarding potential propulsion systems. Someone inside the FBI, at some point between 1947 and 1968, was concerned enough about what these objects were using for propulsion that they formally documented proposals to study it. That is not the behavior of an institution that believes there is nothing to investigate. The FBI explicitly states in this week's release that these documents contain neither recommendations nor conclusions from the federal agency. That means the most significant findings, if any were ever reached, are either still classified or were never committed to paper. The 1948 Air Force memo from the same period has no such caveat. That memo reaches a clear conclusion. These objects cannot be disregarded and must be explained on some basis, perhaps slightly beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking. The agency that spent 21 years investigating says it reached no conclusions. The agency that spent 2 pages reviewing the evidence said they were convinced these objects could not be disregarded. Both documents were classified. Both are now partially public. In 1994, the United States Embassy in Tajikistan sent a State Department cable back to Washington. The cable described an incident over Kazakhstan. 1 Tajik pilot and 3 Americans were aboard a jet when they observed something outside the aircraft. The object was brightly lit, and it was doing things no aircraft can do. According to the cable, the object made 90-degree turns, performed corkscrews, and maneuvered in circles at great speed. A 90-degree turn at speed is not a flight maneuver. It is a physics problem. Any conventional aircraft attempting a sharp turn at high speed is constrained by the laws governing lift, thrust, and the structural limits of the airframe. The forces involved in a sudden 90-degree change of direction at speed would destroy any aircraft currently in existence. The object over Kazakhstan was not destroyed. It continued doing corkscrews, then circles, and then it left. The cable went to Washington. It was classified, and it sat in a State Department file for 32 years. 2022, the East China Sea. Military sensors capture a football-shaped object. It is not moving like a balloon. It is not moving like a drone. The footage is included in this week's release. No identification is provided. 2023, the Aegean Sea. A military report documents a UAP flying just above the surface of the ocean. The object is performing multiple 90-degree turns at an estimated 80 miles per hour. The same physics problem as Kazakhstan, 29 years later, in a different body of water, witnessed by entirely different people. Also, in 2023, In an area where the airspace has been closed for testing purposes, a woman with deep professional experience with military aircraft and drones observes something she cannot identify. She sees an ovoid metallic object floating above a tree line. There is a bright light at one end of the object. Multiple witnesses in at least 2 separate vehicles corroborate the sighting. They watched it for 5 to 10 seconds, and then it disappeared. She would not have reported it if she had seen it by herself. That detail is in the release document. A trained observer with professional military aviation experience in active restricted airspace, surrounded by multiple corroborating witnesses, describes something she cannot identify, and then states she would not have told anyone if she had been alone, because she knows what happens to people who report these things. The file confirms it. Several of her co-workers subsequently made fun of her. This is 2023, the same year the government is privately cataloguing unidentified aerial phenomena encounters and classifying the reports, while publicly the people making those reports are mocked. Her name is redacted. Her location is redacted. Her employer is redacted. The report exists. The experience is documented. But the person at the center of it is protected by the same classification system that has spent 78 years maintaining the public position that there is nothing to discuss. In a separate file, also from 2023, 7 United States federal government employees each separately reported observing unidentified aerial phenomena in the western United States over the course of 2 days. Their reports describe 4 distinct categories of experience. These include observing orbs, launching other orbs at a distance, observing a large stationary glowing orb at a close estimated range, pursuing a large phenomenon near the ground, and observing a large seemingly transparent phenomenon that one witness described as akin to a translucent kite. 7 separate federal employees, separately, reporting the same types of phenomena in the same area over 2 days. Each of their accounts was filed, classified, and unavailable to the public until this week. In 2025, a United States intelligence official was on a helicopter conducting a search operation. The official encountered an orb hovering above the ground. The document describes the orb as extremely hot. The orb traveled approximately 20 miles before the official lost track of it. Then 4 or 5 additional orbs appeared in the same area. They flared up and down. That report is in this week's release. The most recent video in the release was recorded on January 1st of this year. It shows 2 circular lights flying against a dark backdrop over North America. The footage is from military sensors. The objects are unidentified. In total, more than 20 video files have been released in this first tranche. They span locations from Syria to Japan to the American interior. None of them are identified. Not one has a confirmed conventional explanation. The release this week is significant. It is also incomplete. Many of the documents still contain redactions. Names have been removed. Locations have been removed. Specific technical details have been removed. The FBI explicitly states that its own 21-year case file contains neither recommendations nor conclusions from the federal agency, which means the most significant internal findings, if they were ever committed to paper, have not appeared in what is publicly available. The Department of War acknowledged that tens of millions of records remain under review. Congress is already pushing for further disclosure beyond what the executive branch has chosen to release. The classification decisions about what to include and what to withhold are being made by the same agencies that classified these documents in the first place. The rolling tranches will continue every few weeks. What is in the subsequent releases has been sitting in government files, classified for years or decades. What the next batch contains is not yet known. Here is what the actual record shows. In November 1948, the United States Air Force Directorate of Intelligence concluded in a classified memo that unexplained aerial objects cannot be disregarded. and must be explained on some basis, perhaps slightly beyond the scope of our present intelligence thinking. That conclusion was stamped top secret. Over the following 78 years, Project Blue Book publicly dismissed thousands of sightings. The CIA ran a campaign to reduce public interest in the topic rather than investigate its cause. The FBI investigated for 21 years and then said it reached no conclusions. Anyone who came forward with a report faced the same institutional response. There is nothing to discuss. Meanwhile, behind that wall, a 1948 Air Force memo saying these objects cannot be disregarded. A classified Apollo 11 debriefing in which Buzz Aldrin described 3 unexplained phenomena on the way to and from the moon. A State Department cable from 1994 describing an aircraft making 90-degree turns over Kazakhstan. 7 federal employees separately reporting the same phenomena in the same area in 2023. A woman with professional military aviation expertise mocked by her coworkers for reporting an object she watched disappear in restricted airspace. The files released this week do not confirm extraterrestrial life. They do not confirm physical contact with anything non-human. The Pentagon's own note on the Apollo 17 photograph says there is no consensus about the nature of the anomaly. These documents are not a confession, but they do confirm something specific. For 78 years, the classified internal position of the United States government was that unexplained aerial phenomena cannot be disregarded. For 78 years, the public position was that there was nothing serious to discuss. Those are 2 different positions. Both were maintained simultaneously. One was true. One was policy. The next tranche is expected in the coming weeks. Whatever is in it has been sitting in a classified file for decades. Whatever internal conclusions were reached about any of these incidents, those conclusions have not yet been made public. The record was never destroyed. It was only buried. There are tens of millions of records still to come. Subscribe to the Midnight Vault. This file is now unsealed.